Hey guys, this is Chetan for Gizmo Times and you're watching a quick comparison of the Realme's two smartwatches that were together launched, but one was priced the double of the other. So what are the differences? What makes the Realme Watch S Pro a better watch than the watches, and how do they really differ? Because most of what we see on the spec sheets or whatever the pictures are, you'd feel like the watches and the watches Pro are not really different, but take a closer look and you'll see what are the major differences. Firstly, if you take at the front itself, you'll see that the dial or the watch face area is a bit bigger on the Watch S Pro, which is on the left. If you want to get a complete overview of it, this is a S Pro and the right one is the Watch S, and you can see the area or the sizing is much different. You can see that it's much bigger on the Watch S Pro with the 1.39 inches of screen size, while this one is a 1.3 inch, so it's 1.4 versus 1.3 almost. But not just that, the resolution also is different. The resolution is higher on the Watch S Pro with 454 into 454 pixels, while it's 360 into 360 pixels on the Watch S. But actually, if you take a look at it with the brightness side, the Watch S is much brighter and it's an IPS LCD display. So LCD displays, I mean, they have their own disadvantages and advantages, but AMOLEDs are always perfect and better with the colors. So if we change the colors here, you'll see how beautiful this looks, the Watch S Pro. While the S doesn't look that bad, but still comparatively it's not as good. So if you take a closer look again, once again, the brightness here is 600 nits for the Watch S and it's 450 nits for the Watch S Pro. So that's the difference between the two to begin with. And now we talk about if we talk about the brightness here, you can take a look that that we have this one on the level 2 of brightness, this is on level 1. The difference here is that it's 450 into 600 nits. So if we take this to the maximum on both of them, you'll now clearly see that this is almost, I mean, this is more than the Watch S Pro, and that's because of the brightness that it has. So if we have automatic brightness on both of them, so there's no difference in that aspect. But if we keep it at level 1 on the Watch S and level 2 on the Watch S Pro, it's almost close to each other. If you talk about the brightness, it's only a bit darker on the Watch S, but that's the difference there. This is right now on 35% brightness, this is on 15% brightness. 15, 35, 55, 75 and 100 are the 5 brightness levels that you can change the brightness to, and they both have the same protection here. The Watch S Pro and the S don't have any difference in the screen protection, but there are differences with that. Always on is present on only the Watch S Pro because of the AMOLED display that is given here. So that's where is the differences between the displays, where you see AMOLED as a better display than LCDs, and this is the sleep tracking, and thankfully almost the same tracking that we have. And it might seem weird, but I have worn these watches for almost like 3 to 4 days, one side on with one watch, so left wrist with the Watch S Pro and right wrist with the watches, so just to see how good the tracking is. And here there was a difference. You can see that I have worn the watches, I just removed them, and you can see that difference here. The steps are almost double, and I'll also give you the same overview on the app as well to show the differences. And that's where it's not about the tracking here, it's about the hand, the primary hand being used for most of the activities, and that's where the difference would come. And now if we talk about the weight of these watches, it's 68 grams for and now if we talk about the weight of these watches, it's actually 63.5 grams for the Watch S Pro, and that is because of the stainless steel body that is used on the Watch S Pro, while it's 6063 aluminum alloy that is used on this one. So the weight is much lesser, it's almost about 48 grams. So a difference of around 16 grams is what you see between the two watches. On the back you have these sensors, and obviously the sensors are better on the Watch S Pro. And if we talk about all the sensors on these watches, there's a 6-axis accelerometer on the Watch S Pro, which makes it a much better tracker when it comes to different activities, and it's a 3-axis accelerometer on the Watch S. So with the tracking, obviously there would be that difference, and also there is swimming tracking on the Watch S Pro, which is not present on the Watch S. So if you take a look at also the different workouts that are given here, there are some similar workouts. If we talk about the running and cycling and those things, you have swimming tracking here, which is not present on the Watch S. That's one difference. If you are a swimmer and want to track the swimming activity, that won't be possible. And one of the reasons for that is that the Watch S comes with an IP68 certification, and that's okay. I mean, it is easily usable under the rains. You can easily go to shower using the same, but you can't directly dunk into the water for swimming using the Watch S. But with the Watch S Pro, you can do that because it comes with the 5 ATM water resistance. So you can actually go deep up to 50 meters. You don't need to go there, but it has a protection of up to 50 meters of depth of water, and 5 ATM pressure it can handle pretty well. So that's one other major difference. The activity tracking, that swimming and everything can be tracked here, and the water resistance levels are better on the Watch S Pro when compared to the IP68 certification on the Watch S. And now about the battery. So far the battery life, based on what I have used, you can also clearly see from the band itself that I've used the Watch S Pro more than the watches, and I've just got the watches 4 days back, so I can't really claim out the battery on this one. But the company's claim is that the Watch S would give about 15 days battery life, while the Watch S Pro would give about 14-day battery life. And the battery capacity is more on the Watch S Pro because of a 420 mAh battery. It's 390 on the watches, but the AMOLED display would drain a bit more battery, and also the sensors are heavier on the Watch S Pro. That's the reason why the battery claim is a bit lesser on the Watch S Pro. But in the end, I've used this watch for since the launch. I mean, not even since the launch, but before that as well. And since then, I've charged it only once, and it's been working pretty well there. So now under the application, you can see both of these watches being well connected. That's one of the good advantages of Realme Link. Unlike Fitbit, where you have only a single device being tracked and being connected, you cannot have multiple devices connected in the same account. You can do that here. So if you go into the Watch S Pro and you check out the data, it's actually, yeah, it has to still sync the data here. Let me do that on both the watches right now. Yes, it's syncing on both of them. So if you go into the Watch S Pro and look at the data here, it has the step tracking and also the sleep and heart rate and everything. That's similar on both of them. If you go into this as well, you have the steps, sleep and heart rate and everything. And I have done the same kind of measurement on both of them. That's 5-minute interval. 53 to 101 is what it shows here, and 52 to 97. So that's small differences that you see here. But another step count, if you go into yesterday's count, it's yes, it's 2121 steps on the Watch S Pro, and if I go into yesterday's stats on the Watch S, it's 1942. So there's that difference that you would see, usually would see, because the left hand is more of a non-used hand. I mean, if we take a long walk, and that's when, if you see the progress yesterday, I went for a half hour walk during the late evening, and that's when the phone is being used with the right hand, and that's why I feel, yes, there was some of the loss of step count on the Watch S, and this was the free hand, which actually gives you the proper moment of walking, and that's when the tracking was much different. If it also go into a further previous date, if you go into 10th, there's 2652 steps on the watches, 2652 versus, if you go into 10th on this one as well, and take a look at it, 3325. You can see the difference here. Now the left hand is almost like 700 steps more than the right hand, and that is why you have to always decide which hand you need to actually use for the fitness tracking, not for the actual wearing of the watch and using it as a watch, but for fitness tracking you need to use your hand, which is not used for most of the activities like holding the phone or writing down something. It should be the free hand, which is actually free and giving the watch that indication of walking when you're actually trying to do some activities. So that's it with this one. But also I took a screenshot of the settings of the watch earlier, and this is for the Watch S and this is for the Watch S Pro. So there's one difference that you see here, alarm clock, that is not present on the watches. I'm not sure why, but you don't have that feature here. Everything else is exactly the same here. You also have the Find My Phone on the settings below here, but everything else is almost the same, and the notifications are going to remain the same, except that swimming tracking, you don't see everything I mean very differently on the two watches. As I said earlier as well, if you go into this button, you have the option of swimming, and you have more sports obviously on the Watch S Pro when compared to the Watch S in terms of whatever you can track. So you have some of the similar ones, but you also have some which are not present on this one but are present on the Watch S Pro. So the other features, if you go into the main watch face and then swipe it from left to right, you have the battery saving option. You also have the lift to raise, raise to wake, and you have the torchlight option here, but that's not given in the settings over here. You have the brightness adjustment levels and also the DND mode that you can turn it on from directly from here itself. So these are the features that you get on the Realme Watch S and the Watch S Pro, and these are the major differences between the two. I would say if you're actually going for the Watch S Pro over the Watch S and wondering why should you actually go with it and what are the major differences, I'll again give you a quick comparison of the two. This swimming tracking, and actually it's not just the swimming tracking that should make you go with it. The major reason is the 6-axis accelerometer, which would do a better tracking. Obviously there's a gyroscope as well, and GPS tracking as well, and this 5 atm water resistance on the Realme Watch S Pro, and this AMOLED display. The only advantage that the Realme Watch S has is the 600 nits of brightness, so that's the only advantage. This also has a sharper display, 454 into 454 pixels compared to 360 into 360, and also the size. It's the same dial area or the same size of the watch, but the display is smaller on the watches. So these are the major differences. I would say if you're actually going with the Realme Watch S Pro, it's not a bad choice at all, and it is a full-fledged smartwatch with some good activity training options. But if you have a stricter budget, the Realme Watch S is still not a bad choice, but I would say if you are somewhere in between that budget, you should try to increase that budget and go with the Realme Watch S Pro if you are considering an option between these two. So that's it guys, I hope you like this video. If you do, share and subscribe to Gizmo Times for more. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.